At this time, we're back. Michael Castaneda is here, senior business partner at a winery. Michael, what's the name of the winery where you work?
I work at Chandon.
Okay, so you and I used to work together recruiting in the education world, and you made an interesting pivot out of that and somehow ended up in the winery corporate world. How did that actually happen? How did that come to be?
Yeah, I mean, it was a few steps in between from when we worked together and where I am now. But again, a lot of it comes down to, ultimately what I wanted to do with my career. Working in the foundation, nonprofit space, since I came out of school. Obviously, I was very driven and attracted to this mission-aligned, mission-driven work. But after a while, I thought, what other opportunities exist, particularly with, being able to point at a result of your efforts. I think when you're in foundation and nonprofit spaces, that can be a little difficult. The timeline of impact and success really can be a little more, years, decades based. Versus now, if I recruit the right person and everything works out, there's a bottle of sparkling wine at the end of the process.
Yeah, that is a nice reward.
Yeah, physical, tangible thing.
Yeah. So I'm just part of the reason I'm doing this pod is I'm really curious talking to people who are recruiting outside of education because that's all I've ever done. What would you say is the biggest difference between like resume stacks or when you put up a job post between what happens when you're trying to find a teacher versus trying to find someone to work at the winery?
Yeah, I mean, you do get quite a bit more applicants, just volume wise. I think at a winery, there's a variety of positions. So, when we're hiring for teachers, the only difference is sort of the subject matter. So that can really narrow the pool versus, if we're hiring someone in our tasting room, we're hiring a director level role, a winemaker, you get all types of people. And
yeah,
particularly in Napa Valley, there's a lot of aspiring winemakers and directors and execs. So thankfully that hasn't been much of an issue in terms of volume.
And is there any dramatic difference in the process itself? Like, is there performance tasks related to wine? Is there longer processes, shorter processes? What actually happens?
Yeah, so it kind of depends, right? There are more stakeholders involved because, in particular, my company has a headquarters in France. So, depending on how high level the role is, there will be some input from our Parisian office. So, again, I would make that the equivalent to a school leader manager, and perhaps even like, a chief level person being involved in a hiring decision. So that's definitely different. Performance task wise, we have not online assessments, but sort of assessments that test people's ability, quantitatively, qualitatively, on a number of factors. So how well they'll fit on top of, how well they can, make decisions based on incomplete data, which I know is, very different than how our process was at KIPP or anywhere else. So it's been interesting navigating that. Obviously, there is some value, and at the same time, there's some drawback to that as well. So yeah, it's been interesting navigating that and seeing how that ultimately pans out with performance in the job itself.
And then for roles that are more involved or higher level, how often are people trying to change careers into the wine business, or is it only people who have that background can have any chance at getting the jobs?
Yeah, so I do see a fair amount of people who, for example, are marketing directors in tech or in other sectors wanting to make the transition into what we do here. And I will say, I think one of the positive points about our org is that they're very open to, what they would consider non-traditional backgrounds. So not in wine, not in food and beverage, which I think is helpful, right? Because I myself do not have a food and beverage wine background. So I'm a perfect example of it. Depending on who you ask, I would say. But yeah, no, we tend to want to go outside of the Napa Valley, the wine world. All things considered, it is pretty small. Napa Valley itself, like the county and the area we colloquially know as that, is about 113,000 people. So that's a medium-sized city. Yeah. So we kind of do need to look outside of that at times, especially for these high leverage roles.
Interesting. So you've been in recruitment about 8 years. What is the biggest difference in your talent eye from when you started to now, would you say? Because first, like how many interviews do you think you've done now in your career, if you had to put a number on it?
That's a good question because, those teacher hiring seasons, you need to hire 60, 70 people. That's and you multiply from the previous. I mean, I don't know, Eric. That's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
Definitely, I think over 1,000, maybe 2,000.
Yeah. So what's the recruiter
Yeah.
version of you like now? What skills have you honed, or what do you listen for that you might not have listened to years ago?
Yeah, I think I'm much more discerning when it comes to candidate answers. I think when I first started, I kind of wanted to go as by the book as possible when
Hmm.
it came to like uh, relevant experience using certain tools or in certain areas. And now, I'm much more, willing to be like, I see the transferable potential here, as opposed to being like, you don't have the relevant experience in this relevant sector, therefore we can't move forward.
Yeah.
So really making that case to hiring managers and to people in the process, like we should consider this candidate because of X, Y, and Z, and really feeling confident behind that recommendation because of those years of experience, rather than they have 4 years of teaching, therefore we can move forward with them, as
Hmm.
opposed to like, are those good years of teaching? How do you assess that? So,
Yeah. You have friends who ask you for job advice when they're
oh
trying
yeah.
to. What questions do you hear the most, or what advice do you find yourself giving the most?
Well, I'm glad I have this platform because I can say this, and hopefully
Everyone will listen.
dozens of people will hear it.
Dozens. My mom.
There is no mythical, perfect way, secret way where the way you, let me make sure I'm precise here.
Yeah.
Your resume, there is no like secret way to tailor it in a way where it will somehow be auto accepted.
Hmm.
If you're asking me, I just want to see relevant experience to the position at hand, or you explaining how your previous work can be relevant.
Yeah.
There isn't a way like, oh, use this template because that one always gets by. Like, frankly, I like the classic TFA template. That's very,
It really holds up. Yeah. It
yeah.
really holds up.
I use a similar one, not
Yeah.
being a TFA alum, but
That's funny.
um, I think people are always asking like, hey, how should I format it? How should I format it? And it's like that's kind of losing the forest from the trees, right? It's like, first of all, what are you formatting? Because that's more important. Not like, should I use my photo? Should I put
Yeah.
icons, etc.
Like a
So
giant pull quote on the side of it. Yeah.
no need, don't do
Yeah. Don't do that one. That's the one that will get you bounced fast. That's a good point. We hate the pull quotes on the side. Yeah.
that. Or if I can just go on my
Yeah.
soapbox really quickly, the I've seen this come up, and no offense to anyone who does this, but when it comes to how good on skills,
Mhm.
people will put
Mm.
like a semicircle indicate they're proficient
Right.
in
Or
a certain.
I feel like we see it as a line sometimes too. It's like a bar graph going sideways, right? And it's not all the way there because they want to be modest.
Right.
And
They're proficient, not advanced. And again, I mean, it's not helpful because there's usually no x-axis. So you're like, what does this mean? It's just a qualitative uh, opinion. But yeah, again, you want to be really mindful of what you put on your resume. Put data points, put stuff that you have accomplished, that you've improved, more so than like I can do all these things that may not be super relevant.
do you give advice on people when they get to the interview stages, like face to face, and like coach people on questions? And if so, what do you feel like is the most important advice you want people to internalize from you as somebody who's done thousands of interviews?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to prepare you for your next step. I think this personally. I know I tell this to people, but if I heard this in an interview process, I would also be very amped. It's no excuse you're at this part of the stage, or it's no accident you're at
Yeah.
this part of the stage. No one's doing you a favor. You
Mm.
got here because you're qualified and you had a good initial interview. So
Mm.
believe in yourself and believe that will move you forward.
Yeah.
So I always would lead with that, like try to get them pumped because ultimately, like I want you to be hired. I moved you along in the process. I recommended you. I want you to be hired. I want to look good, but
You want to look
ultimately,
good.
I want a great person in the role, and
Yeah.
that I believe that's you. So really doing a little bit of sort of cheerleading in that regard, advocating really, and then again, I send this a resource and it's super basic, but answer using the STAR method.
Hmm.
Provide concrete examples of what you're saying. Answer the question in its entirety, because I'm sure you've experienced, Eric, when you ask a tough question with a few sub questions, and the tricky ones kind of get not answered, right? They're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll answer this and then move
Yeah.
along. And obviously, you and I know when you're not answering it because we're taking notes and we're like,
Pros.
okay,
We're
well, they
pros.
skipped that. So I like, there again, similarly to the resume, there is no silver bullet. You have your experience, you have your skills, convey that, and typically that'll work out.
So let's say everything goes well. When you and I were together at KIP, this is still true for me for the most part. You can't negotiate at the end. It's salary
Mm,
tables or locked in things. I don't know if
yeah.
that's true for your world or not, but what do you tell people about the end process and negotiating once they get an offer in hand?
Yeah. So thankfully, we do have a little bit of room there,
Oh, interesting.
which has been nice
Okay.
from a offer acceptance perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
I got a good rate last year, yeah, I mean, salary. These are jobs at the end of the day, careers, and the money has to make sense. And that's a conversation that like I want to broach at the beginning. Obviously, because in our state, our salaries or hourly rates are posted in the posting, so you know what you're stepping into. But also in that interview, like I want to reiterate, here's what we're offering, here's the range. How does that sound? Do you have a particular number in mind? So I guess the idea is the negotiation sort of begins at the beginning, trying to again level set and be like, here's the room we may have. That's based on your experience, your performance interviews. Just really try to front load that to candidates, so by the time they do get to the end, they have an idea of what's coming. And of course, I cancel, push back, and that's fine. We want to get good people, and that may mean we move up on our range. But unfortunately, like you, if we have a range, we have an upper bound, and that's it. So being very clear about that, like, hey, we won't be able to exceed this. If that's your deal breaker, then it's probably not going to work then.
Yeah. Hey, last thing, you're good at learning new things, staying up on trends, reading. What is the state of AI and recruitment in the corporate world in your world?
Yeah, that's a interesting one. Because I have my thoughts broadly about AI and its application versus like in recruitment. I think in the recruitment lens, I think it's still an area where our org, myself, can continually improve to really leverage its full potential. So again, my ATS does have a AI component where it analyzes the resume and it gives me a sort of percentile score out of 100 on how well it matches the job description relative to the rest of the candidate pool. So it is kind of insightful.
Okay.
I will say though, I still need to go and check because sometimes I get a high rating and not really good match, and vice versa. So at the initial stage, I think it's helpful. But ultimately, like this is a people business, and people have to sign off on you and believe in what you're doing and hear you out. And you really can't use AI to replace that, at least not in our business, right? We want to be sure you have that face-to-face interaction with the hiring manager on site, with our general manager, our exec team. And I don't think anyone would feel comfortable exporting any of that process to an AI, even if it means efficiency. Thankfully, we don't have that high volume where we need to hire everyone immediately. So
the AI is in my eyeballs when I'm looking at these resumes.
Yeah, it's up here. That's why you pay me.
Pay me the big bucks. All right, sell some wine to these people. How can they take advantage of the fine offerings that you, I'm sure, give on a 4 seasons basis?
Of course. I mean, so we're Chandon, located in Yountville, California, in Napa, one of the first wineries you hit when you're driving up 29. That's the freeway to hit to Napa.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And a quick primer in case people don't know, Napa is a city. Not many wineries there. You got to go north into Yountville, St. Helena, Oakville. That's where all the big classic wineries you're thinking of are. Okay. So we're one of the first ones. We're one of the prominent sparkling winemakers. So think American champagne. And we recently revamped our hospitality center. So it's a beautiful site. Already is beautiful, but now it's really awesome. So you can go there, try our amazing wines, our amazing still wines as well. So traditional. And also online, Chandon.com. Check us out. Plenty of good stuff there.
Get some wine. Listen to past episodes of At This Time on all the places you get your podcasts, even on YouTube and Stunning 4K. Michael and I, you can just pop it up there. Maybe they have an LCD projector. You can watch on the big screen while you're sipping your Syrahs and your sparkling. Michael, thanks for coming on. Thanks everyone for listening. Like I said, check us out all the places you get your podcasts. And until next time, catch you soon.